Welcome to another installment of Past Attractions. I am your director and your teacher slash critic, Jeremy Evans. And along with me, also at this school that I will be doing my grades and reports on, Mr. Tran. How are you, sir?
I'm mid. I'm mid.
You're mid? You're mid? Okay. Okay. As you know, what am I directing today? I am directing a popular movie in the 90s.
Oh, get off of me! Ugh, as if.
The 1995 Clueless. And when it comes to Clueless, I want to say that when I think of teen movies, especially teen movies in high school, I go to Clueless. This was my high school movie, probably of like all time my favorite. And you have to remember, in 1995, I wasn't even in high school yet, you know. And this movie kind of helped me give that imagination what high school might be like, right? Not so much of the setting of this movie where you have to look really wealthy to afford to go to that school, but it kind of gets you prepared of the more different kind of people you're going to meet compared of elementary school and middle school. And I think the interesting thing, I definitely connected with this movie as now getting older and looking back at my high school generation, is definitely finding your clique, your group, and just sticking with them and just, doing your own thing and all that. Of course, which you got the tropes of, your nerds, your popular kids, your jocks, all of that kind of stuff. Nam, would you agree with that assessment of your experience with Clueless? Did that kind of give you that imaginary high school, or did you watch this movie later as your adult?
I think I watched this movie more later when I was actually in high school, I
Okay.
feel. I don't remember watching this movie back in like the mid 90s for sure. But just like any other adolescent teen, I was absolutely in love with like Alicia Silverstone from the Aerosmith
Yep.
music videos. So
Crazy, right?
I didn't want to watch it, but it was one of those ones that I don't think I watched it until it became something that was available on like cable.
So we are now returning back to the 1995 Clueless, and the way we're going to do this is Nam and I are the teachers slash critics, and our goal is to kind of have these categories of sections that we want to talk about, and at the end we will give it a grade of what we think, and then maybe if we want to, we can have like an overall thought grade, what we think, adding all our grades together from A to F. So let's go ahead and just have a kind of a the first discussion we have. Nam, this is something that you definitely talk about in a lot of our videos, and it's something ideal that you always aim for, and that's the how long is this movie? Did this movie hit the 90-minute mark, your sweet spot that you love so much? And this movie running at 137, just your initial thoughts of that. Did the movie feel like an hour and a half, or did it feel longer? Did it use the time wisely? What's your thoughts on that?
I mean, the 90-minute mark, which is an hour and a half, is like the perfect mark for me just in general, because I think that's a movie that you can easily get into without actually having to feel like you have to like get yourself mentally prepped and your body like ready to roll. So with Clueless being 97 minutes, I mean, it didn't feel like it was a 97-minute movie. In fact, it felt a little bit shorter because it was well paced. It was entertaining all the way through, and there was always something to really kind of get you immersed into the situation in every scene that you saw. So I absolutely enjoyed it all the way through, and I loved it. And it was a lot quicker than I thought it was.
Yeah, I agree. I think the length and the pace was really good, especially you definitely got like your checkpoints in the movie of where the next kind of plots are going, because it felt like little mini plots. As we're like, I know like in traditional they say like first act, second act, and third act, and sometimes I personally have a hard time knowing like when does the second act start and when is the third act. This movie did a good job of just showing, okay, I can tell this story's over and here's another story that's about to start, and I really like that. And I also agree, like it did not feel like an hour and a half, especially towards kind of like the middle. It felt like it was really, really picking up. But but rewatching that movie, it felt brand new to me, because at the same time I forgot some of the things that they did in that movie. Let alone, I really thought that like was the movie going to end quicker than I thought it was? And I was like, oh yeah, I forgot about this part because I forgot like this love interest or this thing was happening and all that. And then the fact that, I don't know, it's weird. It's just me, but the soundtrack kind of helped the pace too. Did you get that vibe too?
Oh yeah, the soundtrack was very popish for that time period, especially in the mid '90s. And I think it really suited that high school movie. Like at the very least, if it didn't help, it really made you feel like you were more in high school. It made you feel that environment more,
Mm-hmm.
like that, um, like that High Valley, like Beverly Hills, like preppy, like high class school.
Mm-hmm.
Even though, that kind of particular pop or that particular kind of music, like pop music, would just be very generalized and very popular, which is why people enjoy pop music. That's why they call it pop music, right? You're not deep diving into a person's discography to actually find songs
Yeah.
that you like, where you're like being very specific. It's very light, it's very enjoyable, it's catchy, and that's all this movie was.
Mm-hmm. Okay. If I had to give it a grade right now for it, I am an A. Not an A plus, not an A minus, just an A. It was a good pace.
You got an A. I give this grade an A plus personally
Okay.
for the length of the movie. 7 minutes over, it's okay. 7 minutes over the 90 minutes, but I ain't feel it. So
Okay. All right. And we got our first grade down. Let's get into the next category, the high school setting. This movie definitely focused on high school. Most of the majority of the movie is in the high school. Some are kind of one-off that brings you to like, house parties, going to a club, and other mess that they go into. But high school is the place where our story begins, and the place that kind of brings everything to a full circle, right? With our main character going through her adventure in this story, her journey. So, just the high school itself, I thought the high school setting was awesome. Like, yes, it gave me that that imagination of here's everybody you can think of goes to this school. From you see at the very beginning of seeing every clique from the skaters to the populars to the smokers, all that kind of stuff. And then from that beginning, we get straight into the school itself, going inside, seeing the lockers, seeing more kids walking around, everything, and even the classroom, where I think a lot of the personality is, where you get a little bit of like every kind of person. And I think we can both relate to that, because like in high school classes, not as out of control as Clueless puts it as, where like you just sit around and you can do anything you want, and the teacher's just trying his best to educate you. I'm pretty sure we were a lot more strict. Our teachers were a lot more strict in that case, but you still got these different variety of characters that I have seen in my time in those schools. So I thought that was pretty cool to look at. And I was doing some research into this, and I like how someone phrased it as it kind of looks like a high school experiment. Like it looks like just a high school experimental like facility, as you're seeing how these students adapt around each other through their fashion, their expressions, and everything like that. So kind of like just showing that glimpse of the high school, I really enjoyed it. I never got bored of that school, because there was always something new to look at. So I really enjoyed the setting of the high school. Your thoughts, Nam?
it was an interesting setting. That I will say. And I think it's coming from an instance that like Jeremy and I are actually from Oklahoma. So it's not like our high schools are like that big.
Mm.
I think between the two of us, I might have went to the bigger of the two high schools. But that's the part I kind of felt unique about this movie. Like you had the tropes of what the high school is going to be, with like the groups, the people, um, but it's set in a Beverly Hills setting. So you, I feel like you kind of have to assume this is what it's like to be in like Beverly Hills. This is how the school will be set,
Mm.
because for me, in my experiences, just within the high school itself, is that it didn't feel like all of high school. Like some scenes in the movie felt very high schoolish, but some scenes in the movie felt very college,
Mm.
where it was really open, and it's really like you go from like class to class, which is not necessarily when you're in high school. For at least for me, when you went to class, you had to like maneuver around like the hallways, the different levels in the classes, or the different levels, seeing the lockers and stuff like that. Which you see that occasionally throughout this movie, but you see a lot more of them just out in the open where there's like a water fountain. There's
Mm-hmm.
like, you know, big stairs that lead you to like a different like university setting. So I think it's a good mix between the two. I can easily see in it being like an LA Beverly Hills style high school, because that's what I would imagine coming from like Oklahoma, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
a Valley Girl like high school. That's what I would imagine, like stereotypical imagination of what that high school would look like. So I think they really nailed it. I think they did nail the fact that it makes you believe that's what that high school is like, even though it may not be, but that's how you would perceive a Beverly Hills high school to be exactly alike.
Yes, I agree because one of my personal things, I think we talked about before, like, what do we look for when we're in a movie? And I'm one of those people where, like, if you're going to build this world, this universe or whatever, this place you're going to do, you got to give me a tour of it. You can't just talk about it, show about it, right? And I think the movie did a good job of taking me on a tour of this school that, somebody would look at this movie and say, "Oh, I want to go to that school," right? A lot of movies sometimes have a hard time, you know, building this whole world, but don't really want to talk about it. They expect you to kind of already know going in. But I'm glad that they took the extra step of like, no, we're going to show you how the students are like, what the school is like, and in that way. And I do agree. At times it does feel like a college. The only thing I can connect with that is, I think earlier in my high school years, we get these like 20-minute, 30-minute like breaks in between two periods, and that's my imagination of what they have, but maybe more than what we had. Uh, um, Overall, if we had to give this a grade, what would we give it? Nam, it is your turn. What do you give this high school setting?
I mean, it's not exactly like our high school, but for it to feel like what it would be to be a stereotypical Beverly Hills high school, I give it an A.
Okay, okay. For me, I give it an A+ because I just like they just went all the way with that setting. Ridiculous or not, for people that watch it, I don't care. They went all the way with the high school vibe. So I'm A+. All right, let's get to the last part, cast and plot. So basically, just to kind of give it a short like summary of it, we have a main character named Cher, and it's basically kind of focused on her and her high school life, as she is one of the most popular girls, and she believes with her social success of being popular, she ends up using that influence to help other people, but also trying to figure out herself. And basically, Clueless kind of focus on one of the other characters that we'll talk about soon as the example of kind of getting Cher to understand who she is and where does she sit in the high school and herself in life. And so, as I mentioned earlier before, this movie felt like it had a bunch of little acts that we notice. And I kind of want to kind of just talk about each little act and just, I think that's the best way we can split it and just kind of have the overall thoughts of that. But before we get into that, let's talk about some of the cast members that we have. So we have the main character, Cher. Then we have her best friend, Dion. And then the third one coming is Ty. Let's talk about those three first. Nam, what is your thoughts on Cher alone first?
All right, so just to kind of add a little bit more into the plot of the movie, this movie is actually inspired by Jane Austen's novel Emma. So if you guys know what that book's about, it's Austen's most captivating and one of her more vivid characters. She's beautiful, she's spoiled, she's vain, and she's, witty, impressively witty. And she organizes lives of the inhabitants in the sleepy little village, and she does a lot of matchmaking, and unfortunately, it doesn't quite always work out. As far as this movie is concerned, Cher is pretty much that, right? She is the beautiful, like spoiled, vain, but yet very like witty gal in this movie, and I think that she was a really good character. I think Alicia Silverstone was the perfect choice for this particular person, because I think she definitely exhibits everything like that, even though she may not. actually be like that, because Alicia Silverstone was completely different than the actual character that she plays, and you'll see that in a lot of interviews that you check her out in. She says that she was a green shirt and blue jeans type of person, and the fact that she had like 21 different wardrobes to do in this movie, she was like, yo, that is crazy. I don't even understand why people need this many clothes. And the cool thing about it is that Heckerling, the director, she saw Alicia Silverstone while she was on the treadmill watching MTV in an Aerosmith music video, and she was just like, "That's my girl." And you know what? That's how she won our hearts too. So,
Okay. When I finished watching this movie, I realized that I love how Alicia Silverstone did Cher as we saw the transition of her popularity becoming, a different person where like popularity is not everything, right? Like, and it was believable. I love how they made it believable through the transitions of the acts to see this change. It didn't feel like it was just a 180 or whoops, it just became she just changed character. We saw this slowly transition through the pace of the film that I really enjoy. I like the fact that Cher does get challenged on certain situations. Like, for instance, I think an interesting conversation they had with her best friend Dion and Ty was like at a diner, and they were talking about virginity. And I thought that was very interesting because you would think at the beginning that Cher did everything. She's this spoiled girl that did everything, but that was the one thing that she kind of kept secret. And I thought that was very interesting. And I think it gave her a little bit of layer of a character more, that like, she's just not like, I guess in the case of high school, she's not a hoe. and so I like the fact that we saw this a little bit of weakness of her, and she's not perfect, right? And on top of that, like she drives with a permit, but she never got the license. So she has a lot of weaknesses and a lot of issues that we see her go through of finding herself. And I thought they did a really good job of that. I really did. I think they did a really good job of really showing who she is on top of how she is around her family, with her husband, her father, Mel, which quick thing to say, Mel steals every scene he's in. Mel is hilarious. he is just good at every scene he has. I laugh every time he talks. And along with her brother, but not brother, Josh, played by Paul Rudd. So then we have Dion, her bestie, her best friend, her partner in crime, partner in fashion. And I think that she is the typical girl that you suspect from Stacey Dash character, Dion. She's kind of sassy, kind of attitude, very, very, I guess I don't know the word you would put, but she is the type of person that, like, I have a name, do not call me woman, especially from her boyfriend Murray that always call her that. They have a weird kind of relationship in a way. I thought that was very interesting. I feel like maybe you agree or disagree, but it almost feels like sometimes Dion will say what's on her mind, and then sometimes I feel like she doesn't say stuff on her mind. And I thought that was a little conflict with me with that, and I thought that was very interesting for that. But I wonder if it was a disappointment to me that she was more in the first half than the second half. And I wonder, like, was that a good balance for her to only be, like, a lot in the first half compared to the second half? Or maybe that was good because you wanted to give Cher her shine. And I think Dion would have took that away from her if she was always around. And also sharing the spotlight with Ty, because when Ty came in, you have to share that spotlight with Ty being, with Cher's connection. What is your thoughts on Dion?
Dion's character is basically just Cher, except for a more, I would say, more straightforward, more confident version of her. So at the very beginning of the movie, I think to your saying is that, they both were in it quite a bit. And I think the reasoning behind it is because of they wanted to be able to introduce you to Cher and kind of her story and how, like, these are like the typical best friends and how they kind of complement each other. But that was the thing, though. They complement each other, and they were like one A and one B, right? So they weren't like two separate, and like there wasn't like a level below. So once they got to Ty, who was the person that was going to be the project of the entire, well, she wasn't the full project of the entire movie, but she was a part of a project of the movie. And besides her and the teacher, was it Mrs. Geis, I think?
Mrs. Geis, yes.
Yeah, Miss Geis.
Hmm.
We get to see Cher and Dion like plan the whole ordeal with Miss Geist and Mr. Hall. Their matchmaking, so you get to see them work together. But once they got to Ty, they had to bring the conversation to like Ty. Once they got to Ty, the project of Ty, that's when you started seeing them focus more on just Cher and like her trials and tribulations and everything that she had to like go through, not only trying to hook up Ty, but also thinking that, hey, I need somebody too.
Hmm.
Because Dion already had a boyfriend. Dion is already like this beautiful high school girl who kind of has it together and has a little bit more than Cher as far as just everything within the high school realm. So yeah, it went from those two together, which was nice, and veering more to the projects in the story of Cher to kind of give you more depth in her character.
So let's get to the last one. We got Ty, played by Brittany Murphy, and Ty is definitely the kind of, I would say was, maybe you argue or not, yes, it is about Cher, but she was definitely one of the biggest plot points. And we see that also Ty was also in a weird way becoming a reflection of Cher, as Cher kind of like seeing what popularity can do when it's a little bit out of control in a way. But I do like Ty became this nerdy girl that, for one, feel like she did not belong in this school. Especially like the funny line is like, I wanted, do you have herbal tea? And they say, oh no, we got Coke. And she say, oh shit, you got Coke? And it's like, I like that. Like, she's definitely not from this area. And so I like that we saw Cher and Dion transform her into this popular girl. And I also like how the chemistry of Cher and Ty go, as Cher is kind of showing her the ropes as like a tour guide of what to do and not to do and everything like that. And what happens when you also, as for Cher, when you force things on somebody that was not prepared or not wanting that, right? We've seen this clash of, she had a thing for the skater Travis, but Cher was really pushing hard for her to go to look at Elton, right? Where she didn't read the room or didn't see it coming that Elton had a thing for Cher. So I thought that was very, very interesting, especially at the house party, which is probably one of the big moments that we saw kind of all this come together of what was going to happen to Ty from that point on. But I do like how Ty, I just like the way they did Ty. I like the way the acting went for her of just transitioning into this, like her own thing, but not being who she really is in a weird way. It's almost like being a shell of herself, I guess, in that way. And the fact that we had one of the biggest clash is that she had a thing for Josh that Cher didn't know that she had feelings for. And that was an interesting clash thing too. So I kind of like that, because Brittany Murphy's character Ty could have been his own movie itself in that aspect. But they did a good job with this movie getting the story across without like overstaying his welcome.
So Brittany Murphy's character Ty is kind of the prototypical ugly duckling, right? Mm. And if not the prototypical ugly duckling, was definitely the influence, one of the influences in that kind of character. She was the drug addict, basically, the druggy girl who enjoyed just like drawing and having fun, kind of like, in a sense, she's like a skater, at least what you would call it, a stereotypical skater character. And then that these popular girls like saw her and was like, you know what, she's really sweet, she's really nice, let's make her one of us. And so just like what you had to say is that, she became somebody else, which was an interesting ride, because that's kind of how at the very least we kind of perceived the popular kids to be like, right? Is that they weren't popular because they had to be themselves and they were just really cool with being themselves and being very comfortable with themselves, but that they had to follow like that social norms, the social expectations of what they do, who they are, who they have to date, who they have to hang out with, what they can do, what they can't do. So it was interesting to watch her kind of like um her kind of like growth and change, and then kind of get the ego, like you were saying about having an ego once she got to that point, right, where she was just like, well, now that I'm a popular girl, I don't need all this, and then getting all the attention and how she deals with the attention, which in a lot of ways is kind of cringe too, because you're just kind of like, man, I hope if I fell into that situation, I wouldn't be like that. But then again, in high school, I probably would be. So no, it was definitely interesting. Then also seeing her go from like recognizing that into calming down and being like, hey, sorry, I didn't mean to say that you're just a virgin and you can't drive, even though Brittany Murphy at the time was just a virgin and couldn't drive either, when she said the line. So it was really interesting. And then
Yeah. Also, too, sorry to interrupt. Didn't Dion say that too? Like like her and Murray are a couple, but they haven't done it yet. I don't know.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, she said that she technically is a virgin.
Yeah.
She said she's technically a virgin, and you're just kind of like, there's no technical about that. I don't know what technical is. Like, did he just like rub it, and you're like, okay.
Yeah. So those are the main three casts. Now, when it comes to all the other casts, I think I want to talk about who stood out to you in this movie, in
Okay.
your personal preference. So, I'll talk about one right now. I already talked about Mel, so I'm not gonna count that one because Mel, like I said, Mel stole the scenes and everything. I want to talk about Murray. I honestly think I wish I saw a little bit of Murray, but part of me thinks that like the more I saw Murray, like no, I think that's enough. But he always has good moments, and maybe that's why I'm glad. I'm glad he has good moments in sparing instead of like all the time, because one of my favorite parts, well, two of my favorite parts is of course at the party when he wants to shave his head. Thought that was hilarious. It's the bomb. I don't know, that was always cracking me up. And then of course I think the big moment for him was the freeway, right? Teaching Dion how to drive, and we get this moment that not only that Dion and Murray had, but we'll talk about it too later, but the realization that was going on with Cher's situation. I think Murray was a great add-on, and it also shows that like here is what a popular boy is like, along with Elton. So that's one character for me. What about you?
All right. So real quick about Murray. Donald Faison's amazing in this movie, right?
Yeah.
I think you are right though in the fact that I think they presented Murray enough. Like I don't think they needed to do more. And here's why I feel that way. It's because Murray was a very stereotypical black person in high school. It was basically like Carlton, but more urban, right? More ethnic.
Mm-hmm.
So if you were to see, like,
Would you
current,
say he's Will and Carlton if they merge together? Is that what
Yeah.
he become?
yeah,
Yeah.
he would be Will and Carlton merged together, like
Yeah.
what you would see to stereotypical. So I think they went too much into that. That's where you would be like, all right, it's getting a little bit too much now. Like I get it, he's a stereotypical black dude. I don't need to keep seeing it.
Mm-hmm.
So I do think that one is definitely perfect for just the amount of Donald Faison that was in. Paul Rudd, what else can you say about Paul Rudd's Josh? Like Paul Rudd's is just perfect for like everything, right?
Yeah.
Now the interesting thing about Paul Rudd is that he actually wanted to do Murray instead of like he auditioned for Murray. He just didn't realize that Murray was a black guy. And to be fair, I guess in the script it wasn't written as a black guy, but that would have been like now Paul Rudd would have had to be white acting like a black guy, which is kind of like Jamie Kennedy in that one movie.
Malibu Most Wanted.
Yes,
Yeah.
Malibu's Most Wanted, where you're just like, this might get a little bit cringe. Let's not. So it's cool. Like Paul Rudd was like, "Nah, you're right. I can't do this whole white person acting like a black guy." But what's interesting is that he also auditioned for Elton, which is the a-hole pretty boy,
Yeah.
which actually brings to the person I wanted to talk about, Elton. I don't get it.
I don't get it.
Yeah, Elton, the guy who played Elton, Jeremy Sisto, did a really good job with Elton because he looked that part as a douchebaggy, like rich guy, right?
Uh-huh.
But he did not look the part as someone that everyone would want to be with. Because like he was supposed to be that popular guy of sorts, but kind of a rich douchebaggy guy that people would find really attractive, and I don't see that, Jeremy. So like the entire time I saw Ty and Cher talk about like you should get with Elton because he's like da da da. I was like, I don't get it. I don't get it.
It's interesting. Like, part of my imagination has that thing that Elton thinks he's hot in that way. Because, like, why would Cher not jump on the fact of that? She was grossed out when he was trying to kiss her and all that kind of stuff. I feel like it's an inside joke of like, oh, we'll give Ty to Elton. He's the most popular guy. And I think that what goes back to earlier what you're saying, like, is the image that she was trying to get him with, not so much of the looks and personality. It's like, no, he's rich and he's popular, so we're just going to throw him in there. Because why would Cher not get on that? Right?
Yeah.
I thought that was just very interesting. But I agree with you. He does not look the part, 100%. But I think it's funny. It works out for it because I think he thinks that he's hot. One character, maybe you can agree with this. She was more popular apparently on the TV show, but not here. And we only saw a glimpse of her. But I do wish that we got a little bit of a rival-ish kind of way from Amber. I think that was a little bit disappointing. Amber... They threw Amber a little bit in there. Like, the fact that the party that she wore the same clothes, the wardrobe that Cher wore the other day. Like, you kind of felt that conflict there and whatnot. And the banter in the classroom where Amber was calling her out on the debate. Like, what you're talking about has nothing to do with what we're talking about here. Just call her out. So you saw that rivalry, but you just never saw it get pushed. And then that's why it's funny when you said Elton, because, like, her and Amber were a thing, but we didn't care at that point. And I feel like Elton, like, you know what I mean? This is interesting. I think it is a disappointment that Amber did not get a bigger spotlight to show that rivalry to go against Cher and Ty, at least in that kind of way. So, because Amber, out of anyone, was the one that went all the way with the wardrobe. She went extra on everybody. And I think I wanted to learn a little bit more about, like, Amber, even though she is the typical cardboard of, I'm just a total snob, but maybe there could have been more to that if they had time to give her some time to write her in better. So
Amber was definitely an interesting character because I think she did come off like the snobby, like rich girl, but she also was the one that made good points.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And that's what made it really conflicting to me because she was just like, it's like, well, I can't make an argument if she makes an argument of nonsense. What are you talking about? like you don't. I feel like in a stereotypical movie, we don't generally see like the other popular girl make that kind of statement. It's more of the girl that's kind of the outcast. That's just like, she's an idiot. What are you talking about? Like, like a Julia Stiles in 10 Things I Hate About You, or Rachel Leigh Cook and She's All That, where they're like the more of the outcast ones that make those like smart arguments. So it would have been like, in this instance, it would have been like a Ty, but Ty was a part of the group growing up. So I can see why they didn't go more in depth with the two, because then she ended up getting with Elton, which is probably a very dumb thing. Let's be honest. So it was like she made the smart comments, but yet she played into the superficial like world.
Let's go ahead and talk about like the first part of the plot that I want to talk about. The fixing up of Miss Geist and Mr. Hall, where Cher and Dion have this plan. Well, Cher mostly had this plan of she can talk her way of changing her grade from a C in debate to an A, and then it went further on from there. So go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I think, well, first off, kudos to Cher to actually talk her grades up because, like, I didn't know that was a thing, or else I wouldn't have been grounded nearly as much as I was.
Uh,
Just for making a B, just for making a B. Um, I think Miss Geist and Mr. Hall were just like the perfect two in this movie, like the two kind of like outcasty teachers.
mhm.
And the fact that Mr. Hall was played by Wallace Smith, or Wallace, not Smith, I'm sorry, Wallace Shawn, which is like perfect because he just has that like that that look, but also the way he's like speaks and acts
Mhm.
is just perfect for the role where because he's kind of a smartass, but also has that look of like, what the hell are you talking about? Like
Yeah.
you can definitely understand him, but also you can see that if someone was interested in him, like he'd be like, what? I was like, well, let me go talk to her. I thought that little subplot was like really cute to see that this actually worked out for Cher and Dion, and that they were able to get this to work. And that the fact that they were able to actually talk up the grades, because I'm going to tell you what, that's pretty impressive to go from like a C to an A. Like
Mhm.
that shows you that she's not just like looks. She's clever and she's smart at doing what she does.
I 100% agree with that because that's what I wanted to talk about. Like the fact that we found out early of what her skill is, and it's just not just looks. She knows how to use her head at the right place. It's almost she has street smarts for a school, right? And then I love we get the partnership of her and Dion, right? I like that they have this you see this friendship. You can tell like it's believable that they are friends based on their personalities, mostly the same. But you see them working together to make this happen, that two strangers that never thought to look at each other look each other's way. And it just happened that way. So I agree 100%. Mainly that, and of course we get the bond of who Cher and Dion are when they're doing that. Which now it's funny because now we already talked about this other plot, but we saw her try this again with Ty. Like, hey, let's see what if we can use our skills again to help this person. In which we already went down the roller coaster talking about the road of Ty and what happened with that. So let's talk about the next plot or subplot of Cher wanted to get her some too. And this brings in Tristan. And I thought this is interesting because the fact that you have this guy that's like born like has a 1940s kind of style about him, the Rat Pack and all that. Even like Mel makes the joke, which is probably the funniest Mel moment ever. He's like, "What are you, Saving Days Jr.? Like you trying to join the Rat Pack?"
It was just like, you think that Sammy Davis dies and there's an opening in the Rat Pack?
Yeah.
And I was like, that's a good line. That's a good line.
Yeah. And the fact that I like this plot because it actually also shows that Cher is still not aware of reading between the lines or seeing the signs that Tristan is gay until it was time for the date. Funny because everybody else, including Josh, already had that. I don't know how you didn't see, especially like the party that they went to, right? The dance club and everything like that, and they were having a good time, and the fact that he was a really good dancer and everything like that. And then, of course, like I said, like at the date that at her place where Cher was ready to like give it up to this person, and Cher was looking mighty good that night, so much that she burned whatever the hell she burned in the oven and left the oven on and the door open. I was like, okay, all right. We're not going to burn this house down. Cool. That's fine. But I think Tristan, just let alone, either you like him or don't like him, I like that plot of bringing this kind of character in and just showing that, like, Cher doesn't really know her surroundings. She doesn't know how to read the room quite well as she thought she could. So.
Yeah, I think you all right. So you have to set us up with what works, right? Because without the plot about Miss Hall and Miss Geist and Mr. Hall, about those two connecting and then actually working and her like succeeding, then at that point we just think she's perfect, right? Because if everything continues on, there's nothing for us to care about or nothing for us to look forward to, and there's no other layers for us to look at. So obviously, whenever Ty comes in, she's able to get her to make up and be more popular and look better, but also fail because she couldn't see that Elton was just a douche and Elton had no matchmaking ability wanting to get with her. So you had to see some sort of failure. And the fact that, you see that, you understand that there has to be more of like a quicksand aspect of things where things just have to keep progressively not working out until she grows and finds something that has always been in front of her, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which we'll have to talk about that a little bit more in depth. We'll get there at some point. But that's the part where Christian comes in, which is great because Christian, you had to give her a love interest of some sort where she's like, oh yeah, like, but her and Dion didn't catch on to the fact that he was gay, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like at all. Her, Dion, or Ty, for the matter of fact. Most of the guys knew, which brought up Murray's like best scene in the car where he's a gay boy.
Yeah.
Which didn't know. All right, so funny story. When I saw the trailer and him say that he's a cake boy, I didn't know that he was talking about Christian and that he meant that he was gay at the time when I saw the trailer again. Mm-hmm. Because when you say cake, we think something differently in 2023 because we think of someone's ass.
Mm-hmm.
And when you say cake boy, you're just thinking like, oh, he's an F boy, right?
Mm-hmm.
So he's just an F boy, just goes around and does whatever with whoever women. So that's why when I first saw the trailer before I rewatched the movie, I was just like, okay, so I wonder who this A boy is, this F boy is. Then I saw Christian, and I was just like, oh no, he's gay. So when Donald Faison said it in the movie, I was just like, completely different meaning than 95 and it would be here in 2023, which is absolutely hysterical to me. But I love Christian's character. I love the fact that he came in like this whole Buddy Holly James Dean like cool look, like well versed, and then was willing to stand up for what was wrong and what was right. So I really like that he was like the perfect dude, but he was gay, which isn't a bad thing. It was just like, oh, well, okay. I mean, that's so 90s. That's how we would think, right? Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah, no, the perfect person is gay. Yeah. That's a very 90s like mentality for women, because most guys were just misogynistic, which I guess it really hasn't changed too much. But I love the fact that was just like a perfect representation of like the 90s and the fact that, they were cool with it. Like, he's gay, whatever, And I thought Christian played it well. The guy that actually played Christian, I thought he played it well. Justin Walker.
So we'll get to the last part, and that is basically the movie kind of sprinkled it across, and that's the relationship between Cher and Josh. And we saw this kind of build up. Also the confusion of, are they half brothers or not, kind of weird way. Now, were you satisfied, in your opinion, of these two being together? Was it believable that they were going to be together? What is your thoughts on that?
So it's cute. It's cute that her brother-in-law, which is no blood relation between the two of them, the relationship between the two of them and how it became. So it's cute how they got there. However, like, kind of looking at it from a different perspective, like a more outsider looking into it, like, you have to question the relationship is really what it is, right? Because not that I can't say that I haven't been guilty of dating someone really young too myself in my 20s, but like, I think that is the thing, right? So Josh is in college. He has to be roughly around 20, 21. Mm-hmm. And Cher is a 15 to 16-year-old girl. Ty is 15, I think. She said she was 15 years old going into 16. So I was just like, is that cool? Like, it's already interesting that, Josh and Cher are brother-in-law and sister-in-law. Not that they grew up together, but if she was 15 and they were like the parents were married for like 5 years or so, she had to have been like 10 or 9 whenever they got married. So like he's known her when he was like 16 and she was like 10 and 9. So it was an interesting ordeal, right? Because then you had to ask like yourself, is that like a thing that you should be cool with?
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, they did it in such a way in this movie that it was really cute. But when you look at it from the outside looking in, you're just like, he's like 21 and she's like just turned 16. I don't know if that's a cool thing, because back in high school you would look at it and be like, Dad, why is a 21-year-old trying to date a 16-year-old girl? And and they alluded to in this movie that he took her virginity. So it was like it's like okay. And at the very last scene they started making out, or they started kissing in front of everyone. So that's not necessarily going to be okay. Like, don't get me wrong, right? It's weird because when we talk about in these terms where she's 16 and like he's 21, being like a 5-year difference, like when we talk about 5-year difference, like 35 and 30, we don't think anything of it, right?
Yeah.
Like we think nothing of it, but like whenever you get to that particular age, you're just kind of like, a little bit easier to,
Yeah.
like feel like you kind of manipulate certain things and take advantage of certain things. But it's definitely an interesting concept and interesting talk. I know they kind of alluded to it whenever Ty was talking about how her and Josh talked about like college girls wear less makeup and like high school girls wear a lot of makeup. I thought the way they did it in this movie seemed very innocent and very cute, but when you look at it, you're going to have to question yourself morally if it's okay. And that's how I saw it. And it was interesting because I did kind of watch this with Tyra, my girlfriend, and she was just like, they're brother and sister. And she just couldn't get over that fact. So I think it was well written, but I can see why people might be turned off between the two of them.
I think based on how many days this was taking through the whole movie, it almost felt like they were going too quick. I think that was the part that was kind of weird, because it's like, yes, they kind of grew up together, but not like you mentioned before. But at the same time, like roughly, this felt like this happened in a week.
Yeah.
And it's like you guys in a week just managed to have this quick thing and become a thing. That was kind of strange to me. And then the way, like, yes, you're saying it's cute, but Josh did come off a little stockish in a weird way. Especially like when they're all she was about to go out with Tristan, for the night, and he's like, "You don't need me, right? I'm gonna go and keep an eye on her and everything."
Yeah,
I was like,
it kind of felt like he was wanting to protect her, like as if he didn't know that Christian was gay, which he might not have known during that time.
No, he didn't. He didn't know until the end, until like midway, right? Yeah.
Which for us was pretty obvious, but still.
Yeah, but at the same time, you rewind back when she was in trouble and she got after the little house party by Travis, the skater, and the incident with Elton. Elton just left her in the valley, and she got robbed. Knew Josh's number by heart. Good for her. With a payphone that she didn't have to put money in. Good for her. Josh was kind of irritated, like, oh, now I gotta go get her. So like, it almost felt like that kind of confused me a little bit. It's like one moment you really didn't want to be involved with her. You think she's like an idiot. And then next moment, she hasn't, I don't think at that time she has proved that there's more to her. But at that time with Tristan, she's like, oh, I'll go keep an eye on her. I think it's cool.
I think that plays into the whole brother-in-law, sister-in-law thing, right? Where he's just trying to be a good brother-in-law, which is kind of creepy in a way. And like I said, like morally looking at the relationship, you can sit there and be like, is he kind of taking advantage of the fact that, he's supposed to like watch over her or take care of her or whatever. But the fact that it was played by Paul Rudd, you don't really think anything of it. But I mean, if it was played by the same dude that played Elton, you'd be like, that dude's a creep.
Yeah. And then the fact that when we have the flashback of Cher remembering all these moments with Josh, that's why I feel like it wasn't like believable. Like it went too fast. Because like this happened like what it felt like a couple hours ago. Like, now you have this realization that you like him? I was like, this is weird. Like, I don't know. I think it just went too quick and it didn't come believable. Still cute. I like the chemistry they had. I think it's hilarious. I think there were some funny moments, especially like in the car drive. She corrected his girlfriend or girl he was dating at the time or whatever about the Hamlet part, and she referenced it like, no, you said it wrong. It was such and such, that she got it from a movie based on it. So I thought that was funny. But at the same time, still, like, that was enough to really quickly impress Josh, and then, like, I got to go for it, you know? So,
Well, I mean, Josh pitched a tent when she walked down in that white dress, so.
Yeah. Now, Nam, let's go ahead and get ready to wrap this up. You gave the pure length an A+. You also gave the high school setting an A. As for me, for pure length or pace length, I gave it an A, and I gave the setting A+. We got to put the final grade and our overall score. That is the cast and plot. Nam, final thoughts.
So I actually put cast and plot separate. So
Okay.
I'm a little bit different on that. So cast I put as an A. I thought that was an A cast. Unfortunately, Elton, you're the reason why it dropped to an A. And as far as the plot's concerned, I thought it was an A+. I mean, I could deck off a little bit and just make it an A because of the morality of the romance piece of it all. But I thought it was well played. I really did, as far as the movie was concerned. So I gave the plot an A+.
Okay. I did enjoy the cast, for better for worse. Elton, I think he was more hilarious, so I liked him because I think they lean on him being ridiculous and all that. And the fact that you have a clash with him makes it even better for me. Why I enjoy Elton. And the fact that the plot did a good job of the pacing, and we definitely got to see this growth that they share to us watching in this. I am also an A+. So if I had to wrap up everything on here, my overall score of all the categories, I'm just an A. It's a well-done movie. I recommend everybody checking it out, especially if you want to know like what's a good 90s teen movie. This is my go-to first, and still to this day, probably my favorite high school / teen movie so far of all time.
Yeah, straight A's for me as well. Basically straight A's. So it's a 4.0 movie, guys. I recommend it. You'll enjoy it. It's a good ride, and it doesn't stay long enough to where it's unwelcomed.
Okay. All right. And thank you so much for watching this episode of Past Attraction as your director. And we'll definitely see you on our next episode. See you in the classroom.